Good evening. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Just letting people come on in. Welcome to the Sunday night market scan. I am ajoenamedjoe, or you can just call me Joe. I assume this thing's on, but if it's not, don't say a thing. If it is on, be grateful if someone could confirm that. Thank you. We usually get about anywhere from 30 to 40 people in here, so I'll give it an extra few minutes here. How was your guys' weekend? Guys, gals, whoever. Good weekends, bad weekends. Better yet, what was your best trade last week? Apple. Apple was a good one. Yep. Lots of room to move an apple. Get right back up to that range. The Knicks are losing. I did hear they lost. I'm not that big of a basketball fan, despite being a Minnesotan and our team being in the finals. We'll see if they're still there after today. I think it's today, right? Game 7 of the Wolves today. Let's find out. Right. Cool. Are we winning yet? We are most definitely not winning at halftime. Oh, well. All right. Well, yeah, good luck. And it's going to be a Minnesota team. I'm sure they're lose. Typical Minnesota team fashion. Get right up to it and then just choke. Anyway, so my name is Joe. I'm not a financial advisor. Nothing I say is a signal to buy or sell anything. Uh, with that being said, I this is the time that I go over the indexes and or the indices and the big seven stocks, which essentially run the market. And I take a look at them and I see if there's anything that I would like to trade or what I think is going to happen. You can do with the information what you like, but when it comes down to it, it is your decision, not mine, to take a trade. Okay. There's a few things I look for quite a bit. I like trading ranges, as you can see on Apple right now. We set this range and now it's coming back up. I like defining a range because it's very helpful in kind of figuring out where price is going to go. And I like gaps, but not like uh traditional gaps like this gap right here. This gap in price. That's not my favorite gap right there. Although it is a nice gap, it's not my favorite gap. My favorite gap is called the trend bar gap, and that's where the high of the previous wick and the low of the preceding wick create basically a void or an imbalance in price. It's an Al Brooks concept, and that is just my favorite gap right there, trend bar gap. I like to see price retrace into that. I also do occasionally enjoy harmonics, but they don't present themselves very often. A lot of people think they see a harmonic, and harmonics are so much based on Fibonacci retracements and hitting a specific window of a measurement that they don't present themselves very often. So, but all right. So with that being said, let's start up at SPY and we'll take a look at where we've been and where we were going. I was watching. I thought it might bear flag here. That's what it was kind of coming at. And the last time we were here was 2 weeks ago. Okay, so keep that in mind. I wasn't here last week, but so 2 weeks ago I was watching for that bear flag, kind of was setting up here on the SPY, and then it just ripped to the upside and hit a new all-time high. No big deal. The trade that was watching was a nice inside week here. So when I say an inside week here on the April 22nd, price between the high and the low did not exceed the high or the low of the previous candle of the previous week. So this week here was an inside week where price traveled on the inside. And this is one of my favorite setups as well because the trade is a break of the high or the low of that inside week. It shows price consolidating and contracting and trading it within a small range trading. And then the break of that range, and that's what sent us off to the stratosphere last 3 weeks on SPY. So we watching for the break of that high, and then to the high of the previous week, and then we would adjust the stop based on risk. It would be like at least a 2-to-1 ratio, preferably a 3-to-1. But I mean, it ended up ripping. It went out to new highs. So not a bad trade. That was the setup on SPY. I think we're going to continue. I think we're going to continue up right now on the S&P. The Qs also. I was actually looking for a short on the Qs, and we got the rejection, but it also did the same thing SPY did. Put in an inside week, broke the high of that inside week, launched to the top. So I'm going to go ahead and delete that. It had consolidated within this range, broke to the downside, and then ripped to the upside. Look where it found its support, though. The Qs here, right at this trend bar gap that I had marked out. So price came down, bounced at that trend bar gap, got filled through that imbalance, and then ripped to the upside back through the top of the range. And now we're hitting all-time highs on Qs. Diamonds also found that gap. I believe that is, I should have it. It's an exhaustion gap from the weekly. Weekly? That's not an exhaustion gap. Must be a daily. Nope. Monthly. Monthly exhaustion gap. Bounce straight up, new highs. The three gap setup puts the diamonds around 408 and 3/4. So that's basically what I'm looking for. I'm expecting, and if you trade futures or the diamonds, um, you could just probably day trade 0 days on as it goes up. So that's what I'm expecting for that. And you may not trade the index itself. You may not trade the diamond ETF itself. You may not even trade futures, but the companies within the index you could trade. And if we see that the index itself is going up, then you can look at companies within the index, your Lockheeds, your Boeings, your Dows, the bigger the companies within that index, and trade the rest of how the rest of the index is going. You see what I'm saying? So if we can understand where the index as a whole is going, we can make a pretty good prediction on where the stocks within the index might be going, and then we can pick what maybe swing trades that you'd want to take as the index pushes upward, goes in whatever direction that you've determined that it's going to go. So I think the diamonds are going to go up. I mean, that's not a huge. It's only 400 more, or not 400. Sorry, nine more points on the diamonds in this setup. Let's see what the futures are currently looking at. So if we apply the same theory to futures, as you see, I already have the gaps labeled out. That puts it, um, come on now. That puts it right around 48.96. So 40,900 is essentially what we'd be watching, what I'd be looking for a move up on the Dow. And then if we want to go ahead and day trade something like that, I mean, I don't think it's going to make that rip in a day. It's probably going to take the week to get up there. But pretty much every dip, I would look to long into these on a day trade. That's what I would be looking for. Uh, you could do the same thing on the diamonds. And I'll switch out to an hourly candle or an hourly chart here. And just as the price dips uh, into gaps, there's going to be gaps along the way that price is going to dip into and pull back into. As it dips into those gaps, I would just swing longs. So I'm looking for some upward momentum on the Dow. I'm assuming SPY and Q. The Qs are going to follow. And then let's check out small caps. Small caps, see, now we have a discrepancy here. So we've got all the other indexes pushing up to new higher highs, but IWM is not. So I'm assuming IWM is probably going to continue its pullback. I don't think it's going to be nearly enough to impact the rest of the indexes though. So maybe we get like a big run on diamonds and the Qs, and then IWM just kind of waffles back and forth here, and then small caps drops off. But I'm expecting a pullback here in small caps, probably down to at least 205. But it would make sense if it wants to fill this gap down to 200 as well. So now that we have that going for us, we know that we have a pretty good. I have a pretty good idea. Not we. I say we sometimes. I don't know why I say we. It's me. It's my opinion. Uh, in my opinion, SPY and the tech and the boomer stocks are going to keep going up. I don't think IWM is going to be enough to pull them down, so we might see IWM drop regardless. But now going in the Mag sevens, now I can start looking at trades within those stocks. So if I think the S&P and tech are going to continue up, I have a pretty good feeling Amazon's probably going to continue up too. So let's take a look at the chart. Zoom out to a weekly. It did push into a new all-time high. I've been saying that it wants 200 for a while. We got the pullback. We Amazon got the pullback and then the push to new all-time highs, and now it's getting a little pullback again. I have a feeling it's going to keep going. I think Amazon is going to try 200, and I think it's going to try 200 on this big push with the rest of the tech companies in the S&P. So I would be looking at longs coming into uh, the day this week. A nice trend line putting in here, kind of basing out right around this gap right here. So you have a trend bar gap right here, which is supporting price at the moment, heading into this trend line. So I would look for a break of this trend line, and then I would trade, probably day trade, just weeklies up to all these previous highs right here. So there's a previous high right here. And then there's this previous high up here. So that's what I'd be looking at. If I'm trading a single contract, I'd take it off at the first high and then just close the trade and look for a pullback. If I was trading multiple contracts, I'd aim for this upper high here. And then I would take partials at that first high. And then I would adjust my stop right around probably the bottom of that trend bar gap, which should give us about a 2-to-1 trade. Apple been pushing up quite a bit too. So I'm bullish on Amazon. If I'm bullish on tech in the S&P, I'm going to have to be bullish on Apple. And I think it's going to continue back up to the top of this range. I don't know if it's going to have the momentum to get above 200. But that is also the price I'm looking at on Apple. I would expect it to push up there, but I think it might want to like drop back and reload a little bit before pushing back up, or it might just rip. Who knows? But the volume died off for the last 2 weeks as it's pushing up here. It would make sense if it wants to pull back into like the 183s, 184s before continuing it up. But I'm assuming Apple is going to continue up this week. Google is next on the list. Yes. Google, new all time highs pushing through. Perfect setup again on that inside week. Break of the previous week's high. Straight up to that week's high. Boom. Nice break there. I'm a fan of the I'm a fan of Google stock at least. I mean, their company, you can say what you want about their company. Uh, but I think when it was around 130, I was saying we should be longing Google because they are a sleeping giant in the AI world. They've got a massive amount of money. They have a ridiculous payroll. They have gigantic data centers throughout the world. It would make sense that if we're going to push up with AI and NVIDIA chips, that Google is going to be leading that, or at least be in the front pack. And they have. They went from 380 up to, or 180 to 130 to 176. And now they're hitting new all time highs. So I'm expecting this to at least hit 180 this week, maybe more. But yeah, uh, Google is looking like it's primed to just keep going, in my opinion. Here's somewhat of a discrepancy. So we've got tech and the S&P hitting new highs, but Nvidia has not hit a new high yet. And I think that's because it's got earnings coming up. And I think investors are a little cautious going into earnings to see what's going to happen. However, uh, I'm I would be expecting there to be high guidance. So even if they have a poor earnings or maybe just a meets earnings, I think the guidance is going to be what pushes it up. And I think we're going to see Nvidia at 1,000 this week. Uh, I could be wrong with earnings. You never exactly know what you're going to get with earnings, especially with guidance, especially with a company like Nvidia right now. But at the moment, I think it's going to go to 1,000. So I'm just going to continue holding the few shares that I have in this company and not really worry about it at the moment. As far as like day trading or trying to, premiums are going to be juiced up with earnings coming up. So I wouldn't necessarily want to be swinging Nvidia right now, at least options contracts. Um, but if it were to be something that I would swing, I would be swinging like out the money, very low monetary risk. You know, I would not be putting a ton of my portfolio in this. I'm talking like sub 1% into something like this with earnings coming up with as big of a juggernaut as Nvidia is, especially if it's not hitting a new high with the rest of the indexes. So all the bigger indexes, the S&P, the Qs, the diamonds, all the stocks in those, you know, your Googles, your Metas, your Microsofts, I believe they're all hitting new all-time highs, but Nvidia is not. So keep that in mind heading into earnings. I don't think it would be wise to be swinging options contracts on Nvidia right now. Yeah, I'll take a look at Snow in a little bit, and I'll run through earnings as well. So with Nvidia, I mean, if I think Nvidia is going to pull back a little bit, maybe AMD is a better trade for some people. It did get this break from that trend line. It's flagging here. I hope everybody sees how it's consolidating, contracting here. It hits a little high, pulls back, hits a little high, pulls back right back into this area. Very setting a range right here. So if you don't want to, risk the juice on Nvidia, maybe something like AMD is a little more up your alley. Okay. Meta, I was wrong there. Meta did not hit all time highs. As a matter of fact, earnings it dropped, but now it just keeps charge. It hasn't filled that gap quite yet, but it's gotten there. It's getting there, I should say. It did break that trend line, and now it's just consolidating sideways here. Also putting in a range, which we can see going back into this area, pushing forward. So I would expect Meta to probably move sideways this week. Not really something. I mean, if it came down to like 460, I might look at taking a bounce trade out of there. But for right now, it's right back into this range where it was before. So if I zoom out here on the weekly, it put out a range here on this big push up, tried to hold it, dipped back down, and then right back into that range, which tells me it feels pretty bullish to me. But it wants to consolidate and contract a little bit more, which is fine. I would let it do that. So I wouldn't trade Meta this week. Microsoft also did not hit new all-time high. Wow, I was not paying attention this last week. But it did fill that gap, that trend bar gap to the downside. It closed right at that gap. I mean, look at that. Some people say you can't predict the market, but yet you get closes right at these levels. I mean, come on. So it got a trend bar gap. It did get the pullback a little bit when it dipped into it, but it got the push back up, and then came down, took out the stops, and then pushed back up and closed at the top of that trend bar gap. So Microsoft, uh, it looks like it came down to reload here, and now it's going to push back up because you see how it stayed closed. It dipped twice out of this range, but it always closed back in the range. And that's telling me dip buys. If we look down, we've got increased volume here. As soon as it dipped out of that range, dipped out of the range again, got bought up. Lots of big green days. I think we're going to see Microsoft rip up probably to 435, 440 this week. Tesla. I was looking at their weekly, and so before I had this channel back here that I was watching, and so there was another channel within this, like right here, that we had been watching for a few weeks, and we were taking longs as it bounced out of this channel, right? And then it got rejected into this trend bar gap, and now it's just kind of dipping down more and more. Broke to the downside of the channel and then got bought up hard coming out of this gap from the weekly, which was something that we were watching as well. But I took this and I went ahead and extended it out to this previous high, and I noticed that that is a really big trend on a large time frame. So irrelevant where this bottom line is, you could adjust it to wherever you want to fit whatever narrative you want, really. I think I'll probably just leave it right where it was. But this top trend line is going to be the one that I will be watching in the coming weeks to see if it can get back up there. You could also see that it's putting in a head and shoulders, an inverted head and shoulders pattern here. Got the pull out back out of that gap. Hit this, came back into that gap, and now it's pulling back. So maybe we get that kind of a. I mean, it's a little wonky, but it's almost there, right? Almost there. But the push down below it into a point of interest, which would be this gap, and then the bounce out of it back into the channel. Feeling pretty bullish on Tesla, at least to the top of this channel. And we'll see what happens when it gets there. Looking at the chart again, if I zoom in here, there's a inside week last week. So I would look for a break of this high around 180 for push to 187, or a break of that low around 168 for push to the previous week's low around 167. So the downside trade, it really isn't the best. The downside trade may or may, because there's no, we have this this candle right here, which I could take a fib trace there and then target the 50%. So if it breaks this low, I could target the 50% of that previous, that big candle right there as a possible target. But I don't really like that. That leaves that leaves my target ambiguous. So I'd rather trade the upside break because I have a pretty clear target at that previous week's high, and then I could adjust my stop accordingly to whatever risk tolerance that I want to. But I feel like the upside move would be the better trade. We move down on a weekly basis or on an hourly basis. That feels like a much better trade, in my opinion, that I would rather take. Okay. So that's what I'd be looking at on Tesla. Looking at the 1 hour here as it pushed up, came back down, reloaded, pushed up again, and now it looks like it's going to try. So we'll, I would keep an eye on Tesla this week. All right. Now, some earnings. Earnings. We do have Snow. What else do we have? We have Target and Zoom. All right. So I'm just going to start kind of closer to the top of this list. We won't be able to see much, or we won't be able to do anything for Monday before the open, but LI Audio or LI Auto is here. If we look at a weekly chart of LI, this has been one of those car manufacturers that out of China that has been gaining some momentum coming out of this $12 range here in October, and it ripped all the way up to 40. Now it's pulling back. I think it might want more. So uh, this would be, I mean, this is a really nice trend line right here that it's been putting in. I would keep an eye on that. Trading contracts to the upside if it breaks. I'd look for a break in the first 2 hours or in power hour, but we'll see what happens since ER is before the open. Pan W is also going to be a pretty big one here because they've had that big drop and now they're really starting to push up. As far as I haven't looked into it yet, actually, but as far as I've heard, Pelosi is still long, and she was long before last ER. And from what I understand, she's still in calls for Palo Alto Network. So since I haven't heard anything different, I'm assuming that she's still there. And if she's still there, I mean, she just made $20 million so far on her portfolio this year, and it's only been 5 months. So that should tell you something about how she's trading. So if this is your cup of tea, I would keep an eye on Pan W for some upward momentum on that. Zoom, Kathy's been dumping this thing for weeks now. Uh, to be honest, I think they've peaked. We're using Zoom right now. Clearly, everybody has it and uses it. The problem is there hasn't been much as far as innovation from them. So, I mean, this last update, I've had nothing but technical issues with the last update. Every time I come on here, I've got to try and figure out some sort of setting that was tripped and not working well. So, Zoom, I I'm just bearish on the company as a whole. I don't think they have anywhere else to go. So I would personally be looking at puts, especially if it gets up around 68, 67 area in that trend line. Bunch of companies I've never heard of. Macy's is the lows. Does anybody trade low? Low has earnings coming up. Very high up here in this range from the weekly. Hasn't come down very far at all since it got that big breakout in during COVID. And I mean, it pulled back. Sure, let's take a trace up to the highs, down to these lows. I mean, honestly, there's it got the break above these highs. Just looking at this chart, and now it's getting rejected. We'll see that. Nando, I'm long on Amazon. I think it hits 200 this week. But it has this order block right here. Which I'm sorry, I didn't mean to burst your bubble. But it has this order block right here that it's that supported price, rejected price earlier, got the push up, and now it's trying to support price. So unless it gets back over that 237 and 31 mark, I can't really be bullish or bearish on it. I think I would be trading. Its current price is currently trading in this order block. It's not really something that I'd be looking at. Uh, Home Depot, very very similar setup on the weekly here. So I would honestly wait for the earnings and then trade whatever direction it decides to go after the earnings. I wouldn't trade the earnings on Home Depot or Lowe's itself based on the chart and where price is. XPEV, you could probably get puts and be safe. This thing has died, put a nail in the coffin. Probably going to get bought out, maybe by LA Auto, depending on how much they put up. Target also up there. Got the nice move back up, pulling back. I can't help but be bullish on Target. Uh, Personal opinion on Target. I know they've got their social stance, uh, but completely honest, like it's basically I have an Amazon warehouse at my disposal, and all I have to do is pack my kids in the van and drive up there, push a couple buttons on an app, and they bring stuff out to me. It's super magic. Uh, I like Target. It could be because I'm from Minnesota. It could not be. I don't know. I like the company. I'm bullish on them. Kind of like Raging Kitty. I like company. So I would be looking long on Target. Let's see. I got some messages here. Y'all are blowing up. Nando says a dirty word. Nando is if I'm homeless. I'm homeless if Amazon pumps. You've made so much money already, though, Nando. Why are you homeless on it already? I mean, all right. We'll look at the chart here. I mean, come on. The 1 hour breaking that. Look at the weekly. Got the pullback off that new push into 191, filling this area. Bounced at the daily gap right there. Like, I think it wants 200 this week. If not this week, next week. But I'm pretty sure it's going to run. Pretty sure it's going to run. Bullish on SPX and SPY. SPY, Qs, diamonds, bullish on all of them. Bearish on IWM. All right, so I'm feeling long on Target. The rest of those companies I don't care about. Nvidia, this is going to be either what breaks or pumps the market. I mean, their guidance is going to be huge. Nvidia is not an earnings that I would trade this quarter, especially right now, especially with it hitting a lower high, while the rest of the chips at a higher high, or the rest of the indexes at a higher high. I'd be cautious heading into buying Nvidia right now. Give back. I mean, that's a lot of sauce to give back, man. Nvidia broke out at 500, and it hasn't. It's barely looked back. So, do I think it's ready for it to give up the sauce? No. I think there's a lot more room in Nvidia. I think there's still a lot of growth in that company, and it hasn't broken a long-term trend line or anything like that yet. It's still going up. So I'd keep an eye out. I think it hits. I think it hits 1,000 this week, especially if guidance and earnings are good. Snow, big drop. I was looking for a retrace into this breakaway gap, which it inverted. It did this here, and now I still think it's going to drop down to 138s, 137s, and that is where I would look to go long. So I already have the trade on the chart from previous weeks. Okay. But that is what I'm watching for. I would be watching for the earnings to probably disappoint, come down to 138, and that's where I would look to long on it. So somebody had asked for snow. Met ready. Let's call you ready. Because I can't pronounce that name. All right. You are welcome. TD Bank is on this list. I don't know why, because they're not TD Bank anymore. The rest of these companies I don't really care about. So that's what I'd be looking at for earnings. And then I said some other stuff too when I was going to do this, right? Let's do Meg 7 options flow. All right, let's take a look at some options flow for the week. Let's see what we can see. This W leap I had made note of. W65 puts for January 16th, 2026. 600 days, right around 1700 a contract. Maybe your cup of sauce, may not be, but that was definitely notable. GameStop 524, 2450 calls. Heading into power hour, somebody put down 500,000 into those. That's something that we'll definitely want to watch. If GameStop can continue the whole meme thing, great. If not, great. You know, it is what it is, right? We can't really change anything that's happening in the market. But somebody just put, $533,000 into something that expires in 4 days on a meme. So I mean, I get that people are reckless in the market, and I get that people use it as gambling. But I mean, I got to take note of $500,000 into a meme stock with 4 days. Okay, so keep an eye on GameStop. They got filled at around 254 a contract on an average there. So I don't know what those are going to look like in the morning. Probably going to take a little bit of a hit on theta unless GameStop gaps up and gaps up a little bit hard, because there's 300% IV on these contracts, and it's probably going to go up a lot. NXE 621 9 calls, also notable. Somebody put $600,000 going into close on those. Got filled around 30 a contract. So for those with smaller ports, that might be a contract that you might want to take a look at on Monday to see if see maybe they're a little bit cheaper. The open interest moving over is going to be interesting, but I'm pretty sure it's going to show right around 23,000 right around tomorrow morning. So NXE 9 calls for 621, filled around 30 a contract. These GameStops expired. These all expired. Hood November 15th, 25 calls. Somebody put another 500,000 into those. Uh, I've been saying long Hood for a long time. I think there's a lot of untapped potential in Robinhood. Think whatever you will about the tribalism between Robinhood and not Robinhood, but I think their company has a lot of room to grow. Yep, open interest only updates once a day, about an hour before open, hour and a half before open, I'd say. It only updates once a day, and volume is live, and volume only ever goes up. So these ON contracts, these expired, but these ripped pretty hard. They went from $1.30 to 635. That was a nice trade. These Blink ones, not really a fan of those. Excuse me. The CCJ ones here. Somebody dumped 1 million into CCJ on Friday. Right around 900,000 of that came on these two bars. So keep an eye on CCJ. I think that could be a mover. These contracts are originally filled at 130, and then it looks like they may have added more around 207. Put 500. Maybe, maybe not. The Anth is more likely to get shares on something like that because he'd rather just not give his money back to Theta, I think. Very similar to me. I don't like giving money to Theta. So, yeah, but it could be Grizzly. He could be buying those up. Who knows? Boeing 182.50 puts, these got hit throughout the day. Gonna have to wait to see what happens with these because on the 16th, I thought maybe we'd be getting some volume coming in, or we did get some volume coming in, but only 1,500 of it transferred to open interest. But there was another 4,700 volume on Friday. I think Boeing again over the weekend was in the news because a plane caught fire sitting on the runway. I think one of the engines blew up while it was just sitting there. So yeah, I can't I can't like this company right now. Let's take a look at the chart on Boeing. I am in that long, but with the fire, I mean, maybe investors are just done. Maybe they just don't care anymore. Like maybe there's been so many fires and so many blowups. Like I don't know. I feel like they've got to do something though. I feel like Boeing's got to. They've got to fire their executive team. They've got to get out of there because clearly the leadership of this company does not care about anything other than making money. And right now they're about to lose a whole lot of money. So Boeing, I know there's a long on there. I'd actually be looking short. I really don't like the way this company is being run right now, and I think investors are going to start getting annoyed by it. Also, let's see. I think it's about it. Um, these Tupperware, somebody put a million of these at 315. They're around two now or 299. So yeah, see, Boeing shareholders approved a giant pay package for the CEO. Unfortunately, I hope they approved the package so that they could fire his ass because their entire executive team needs to go. Like just based over the last year, that the leadership of that company is not good. I would not be long Boeing right now. I'd be long Lockheed Martin because I think a lot of their business is going to end up going to Lockheed Martin. Probably a lot of their contracts too. Boeing also has a contract with NASA to put a space capsule up into the space, um, but it's been delayed like six times now. So like, I would rather buy Virgin Galactic Holding here at $1 than put money into Boeing. If that tells you anything about that. No other real like super notable options flow coming out over the past 2 weeks. Uh, that GameStop is probably going to be uh, the wild card. See if that one takes hold. But Hood also I think is a good one to look into, and CCJ, which is a minor. Is that am I thinking of the right company? Cameo. Yeah, these guys they're miners, right? I'm pretty sure. Pretty sure it's a mining company. Yep, uranium, copper. They're pretty known for those things. So yes, that is a company that I was thinking of. I think CCJ is going to continue up. That makes me feel better that I am also long that company. All right. Any questions? Anything anybody would like to maybe make note of, or any tickers the rest of you would like me to take a look at here? Medtronic has earnings this week. They're a little beat up. Nice move there. Got that push down to the bottom here in the 68s. Gathered all those stops out. Ooh, they took out COVID lows and then jumped right back up. Hmm, interesting. Yeah, that would be something to watch. That'd be something to watch, in my opinion, for a move up on Medtronic. Long shares on Tesla. I mean, if you want to, if you, in my opinion, if you're going to long shares on Tesla, you need at least enough to get 100 so that you can sell options against it. And that is so you can lower your cost basis because if it's going down, you might as well lower your cost basis and sell covered calls. If you're just going to if I just had the money in my portfolio to get maybe 5 or 10 shares, uh, I don't know if I would necessarily worry about that right now. I would I would prefer to look at getting the breakout of this long-term trend line, because we might be in a position where it dumps out. Who knows? It's already broke to the downside of this channel once, found that gap, got the push up. Hasn't really switched enough, uh, where unless I have more money to put in to buy more shares, I wouldn't. If I had $500, I wouldn't just buy $500 of Tesla and hold on to it, because that's just not a good idea. But over to Starbucks. I don't like this company. I've been saying it for a while that I don't like this company. I don't like the fact that they're price gouging the holy crap out of their customers. And um, I just really don't like the company at all. I don't think they do good business. And I don't think that they are going to stay up here very long. I think we're probably looking for a return to this range down here from 2016 in the 50 to 60 range. That is my opinion. Uh, but for the short term, I think it will probably get a bit of a push back up. It'll probably hit around 82 and a half. And then I'm assuming it's going to continue down. So over the next 2, 3 weeks, probably a bounce, because even if you drop a dead cat out of a window, it bounces when it hits the ground. That's where the dead cat acronym, or the dead cat saying, comes from. So even if you throw it hard enough at the ground, it's going to bounce, right? So price dropping below that low, all that big sell volume bouncing a bit, I think it's still going to roll over and head back down, in my opinion. Verizon took out those highs, couldn't hold it though. Feeling like it probably wants to return back to around 36 based on this. So you couldn't seal the deal on those highs, and then ended up coming back and hitting a lower low here, pushing up for a lower high. I'm assuming it's going to continue down. Yep. Walmart, boom, price target hit. Unfortunately, it never got to my entry. I wanted to see it come down here below 58 and into 57 for an entry on the long, but it just went ahead and ripped up to that setup that we had been watching on the weekly for the past few weeks. So here's the Al Brooks 3 gap setup. You have the measuring gap here. This feels like a monthly setup, and I was right. So we got the breakaway gap right here, the measuring gap. You take the previous swing low that we got the breakaway gap from, measure up to the middle of the measuring gap, and now you duplicate that and push it out to a price target, and that's exactly where it went to. Would have thought. So that trade is done, unfortunately. So where does it go from here? I think it's going to push up. I think it's going to continue to push up just a little bit more, probably into 66. And then either it's going to do one of two things. So I think it's going to push up into 66 and either range right up here and consolidate and decide if it's going to make its next move up or down. Or, I mean, honestly, I think that's exactly what it's going to do. Honestly, that's exactly what I think it's going to do. I think it's going to push up into 66 and range up here and then just kind of be annoying. So the trade has already happened. We're only, we still have some time left on the month. I would like to see more buy volume come in here on this monthly candle and push it up to 66. Big move there. Big buy volume coming in. Still some sellers from these 2 weeks here in control, but we'll see. I would like to see it push up to 66 in range. So that's what I think is going to happen. MU, I was saying for a while that this thing is a sleeping giant. We're watching this wedge back here. Got the rip, went from the 70s all the way up into the stratosphere. The pullback, very similar to what I was watching on NVIDIA. I think it was NVIDIA. but looked like it was putting in a bear flag here. Got the breakout to the upside, the little dippy roo, and then the back to the upside. The difference is no difference. Did not hit that new high. So I think Micron is going to be sitting very much watching NVIDIA and what they're going to do and their guidance. I think MU you could probably use as a sympathy trade on NVIDIA's earnings. But looking at the daily, looks like a double top, may come back down. I think it's very, very much going to be dependent upon what NVIDIA does. So whatever NVIDIA does, Micron's going to follow, in my opinion. United Airlines, I don't really like airlines that much. However, over the past week, I've been watching the options flow, and I have noticed bearish positions coming out for Delta, American, and United Airlines, the big three. Uh, so, looking at the chart, it pushed right into that trend line. A lot of puts coming out on the ask, a decent amount of money. Uh, I'm feeling bearish. I'm feeling like it probably wants to pull back here because it got that big push up here with that volume, but it wasn't at the trend line, and it got this little push, this little measly push into the trend line on such small volume. I think it's going to pull back, and it has a nice gap here to pull back into on the weekly. So I would look for it to pull back based on what I'm seeing in the options flow into here, and then maybe try it back up here for a move back up. But right now, I'm bearish on the airlines, especially the big ones, because that's where I've seen a lot of put money come into. Like that. You are welcome, Laurel. And thank you for coming out every time I do this. You're in here asking questions, wanting to be involved. Makes me feel special. I appreciate that. Anybody got anything else? If not, we'll call it a night. It's right around 10 o'clock Eastern time. GGGGG says smiley face. All right. Well, I think we'll call it there. If anybody has any questions, feel free to hit us up in the Discord. Any charts you want us to look at, setups you think you might be seeing. We'd love to answer these questions. That's why we're here. We want to teach people to be traders, not just signal followers, not just mindless zombies who tell people at Thanksgiving that they're traders because they follow somebody else's trades. So if you are, if you're here to learn, I commend you. Ask questions, constantly ask questions, constantly be learning. All right. With that said, y'all have a good night. Sleep well. Come to the markets ready to go. And I'll see you in the Discord. Take care.